Welcome back, everyone. Are you having fun? We've got some good sessions on the agenda today. I am very excited to introduce Marianne Ellert, who is joining us again after rave reviews from our 2019 conference. Marianne is a certified financial planner who specializes in working with families of individuals with disabilities. She was drawn to this work because of her younger sister's struggle with CPE, and focuses her work on assisting individuals and families in developing both short and long-term financial strategies as unique as their families. In addition to her work as a financial planner, Marianne serves on the Cordelia de Lang Syndrome National Foundation Board, Special Olympics Illinois Foundation Board, and advisory groups for Tales for Life and Integrative Touch for Kids. Please join me in welcoming Marianne.
Thank you. I'm totally pleased to be here today. We have a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to get right to it so that we have time for questions. So why do I do this? I am the sister of a person with cerebral palsy. She was 4 years younger than me. This is Marcia. And she taught me what is really important in life. At a very young age, I was 6 and she was 2 when my parents got the diagnosis. My parents sat me down as a 6-year-old and said, Marcia is going to be your little sister and you are going to be able to take care of her for the rest of your life. And at 6, I really didn't understand what that meant. But as she got older, I learned to understand what the responsibility was. I was there for her as she got older. I helped my parents think about where she might live for the rest of her life. She did move into a residential facility and lived there for 9 years. At the age of 39, she had a seizure and was unable to turn over in her sleep, and she suffocated. But that totally changed my life on that day. I had many, many discussions with my parents over the years about what they wanted for her dreams and their fears. And over time, I also am now the mom of a young man who has disabilities. So I've lived it. And I watched also my parents become disabled as they aged. So my life is in this world of yours, and I have learned what is really important. So my mission and Protect Tomorrow's mission is the same as yours. It's to make sure our children, all of our children, are happy, safe, and have fulfilling lives. And so we're going to get started with some of the things that you need to know about. We have about 45, 50 minutes to cover a lot of detail. So I'm going to just go through it in a high level today and have some time for questions at the end. Okay. All right. So the thing I know about us as parents is that our lives are really complex. We have so many things that our lives naturally we have to cover as parents, right? We have other children perhaps, but then we have a child who has some special needs and disabilities, and we need to be thinking about doctors and IEPs and all the other things that we focus on in our lives with them. And then somebody like me comes along and tells you, you know, you need to plan different for the future as well. And we have to have a care plan, always thinking about tomorrow. And somebody said to me the other day, you think about the future all the time relative to today. And that's what I do, right? Some people can just focus on. And the interesting thing was I was doing a session for dads the other day, special needs dads. And what I learned is there is a difference between mom and dads, because dads tend to focus on what do I need to do today? And sometimes moms, because we're sometimes the caregivers, have to think about the big picture and always thinking about the future. And so I've learned that what sometimes works is, mom, you think about the big picture and give dad the today jobs. It works. But this is our 8-step process, because we know that if I try to tell you too many things you need to do, you'll have just way too much on your brain. So I'm going to cover a lot of these different points that we need to cover today and do them at a high level. And then you can always dig down at a later point. Now, lots of the information is on our website if you want to go back and listen to something like this again, or look at the different steps and say, where am I on the picture? All right. So our goal today is to give you some awareness of the things you need to do so that you can take action from here. And at the end, I'm going to ask you for one thing that you heard today that you think you need to identify as the next step. So our first step we always like to start with is, I call it take a candid look. It's to say because I know that some of you might have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 8-year-old. You might have different ages of children. And we can have people in a session that have much older children, or It could be anybody, it could be grandchild, right? So I asked 2 questions, and I'd like you to think about these. And if you have a pencil, maybe write them down. Number 1 is, what is the best thing that can happen for your child's future? The absolutely best thing that is not a cure, because that's something we necessarily can't control. We can lobby and try to get funding for that. But for this purpose, we're talking about a future care plan. What is the best thing that you see could happen for your child's future? And then the second thing I want you to think about is, what is your biggest fear? So write those 2 down, because those will be our benchmarks as we go forward and think about planning, right? Best thing that can happen and your biggest fear. Now, I'll tell you what I hear from a lot of families, because we're not being interactive today. So I will tell you what I hear. I hear the best thing that could happen is I want my child to be happy. That's a very common answer. It's always the number 1 answer if you're playing Family Feud. And the best thing that could happen is people want their child to be happy and secure, right? And their biggest fear is abuse, that they won't be able to control, and we won't be able to be there for their future and to make sure that they're okay. So best thing that can happen, happy, have a fulfilling life, and worst thing is abuse. Yours might be different. And some of that happy, I always tell people, what does happy mean? Because happy for my child and happy for your child and happy for somebody else's child is different. So our job as parents is to dig much deeper than that. We can't do planning, and we can't plan their future if we only use high level words. And so as you go through, you're going to hear me talking about some very detailed things you need to be thinking about. But once we get that, and we have those 2 benchmarks of what we want, what we don't want, basically, we need to think about, how do we create a map then for the future? So the first thing I will tell you, as a parent, I just want to keep my son safe, right? And so I tend to put my children first, and I put myself second. And I watched my parents do the same thing. We had 6 children in our family as children, and my parents gave up a lot. And now as I look back on it, I see how much they did give up, but they gave up everything, even having nicer clothes and nice things, because they wanted my sister to be find a cure. And we would go to all kinds of doctors, and we would go everywhere we could and go into school programs and try to help the school programs. And it was time for her to live residentially. They would do anything to get her into the right place, right? And to help her find the right avenue of security. So I'm going to back up a minute and say, your child is not going to be okay into the future unless you have done your own financial planning. Now, this is not a financial planning class, but I would tell you this step is one of the most important things you can start with, and to know what you have, to know what you don't have, to know you have, you're planning for your own retirement, because as in your retirement, you're not just retiring for 2, you're retiring for 3. You're going to have to make sure that your child's okay as well as you. You have to make sure that you have the proper life insurance and all of those things that come into play in planning. Then once you know that you're okay, then you feed your child's plan into it, right? So what does that mean? Well, I got to know what my child's future is going to look like. And so I'm going to create a vision. And the vision is going to be, as my child gets older in the different stages of life, where will they live? Well, through school, they're going to live with you. As they get older, where will they be? What do we see for them? What kind of medical needs are they going to have? What are they all tied to? And this all feeds back into the plan. And I'll kind of talk about relating this plan for your child to your own plan. Okay. What's their recreation? What is fun for them? What is their education going to look like? Could they work? What are the other kind of costs we may have, right? And so when we think about those, then we can quantify them and say, okay, what's going to pay for that? So it's very similar to when I'm doing a financial plan for a couple. And I'm saying, so what does your life look like today? And we define it in terms of what we see, but then we quantify it. So if I was doing a financial plan for a couple, and I'd say, okay, how much you spend on your home and how much you spend on utilities and vacations and insurance and all of the things you spend money on. And by doing that, I can kind of quantify what the future might look like. So as somebody's life, they're looking forward to it. So we're going to do the same thing for your child and say, where do we see them living now into the future? What kind of services do we have to get for them? And what is going to pay for that? We do the same thing for ourselves. So Benefits is a really important piece, and that's the core structure of how we might get funding in the future. We could save. We need to have insurance so that if something happens to us, there's money left over. I see many people in retirement telling me that they have this pot of money over here that they can't spend. And I'm like, why? Why can't you spend that pot of money? They said, that's the money we set aside for our child. But, and they want that's what's going to care for them in the future. That's not where we don't want you giving up your future. We want to think about making sure you have a full life too, and that we have saved for the child. And so sometimes life insurance is used for that purpose. Other family members. So it's really important to talk to grandma and grandpa and brothers and sisters about how they might be helping fund this. If your child's higher functioning, they may work, and then all the other resources. So those are the pots of money that we're going to be looking at, right? And then we create this cash flow, and we say for each of these different stages. So on the blue boxes on the left are all the different stages of our child's life in their early childhood. They get into regular school. As they come out of school, if they're in special education, they may be going into transition. Then they're in adulthood. In adulthood, we assume that we want as much independence as we can have for them. And then there's this last stage, is life without you, and it is different. Okay, my son, in addition to having other disabilities, is also blind. So when I'm looking at those stages in adulthood, I'll be around. Okay, I'll be around to make sure he has transportation. He'll never drive. He'll never be able to do a lot of things. He lives independently with resources. But if I'm not there, I'm it in a lot of cases for him. So I'm going to have to replace myself. And so I've got to quantify that for that last stage. All right. So the 23 to 65 is my retirement while he's an adult. And then when I'm gone, I need to replace that dollar. So we do actually do a cash flow for each of those stages. And we talk about SSI and Medicaid. What will that provide? We're going to talk about that next. What will other family members perhaps contribute? What will we contribute? So that's the income. Now I will tell you, if we just said, okay, I just got SSI and that's, $794 a month. And if we quantify that to a year, let's say we got $10,000 coming in, but the expenses are $40,000. We're short $30,000. Who's going to come up with that money? Us or the government, right? All right. So let's talk about the importance of government money. And I'm going to just glance through some of the things you need to know. We could talk 2 hours about benefits and all the nuances of them, but I'm going to go through some of the basic rules so you remember them. There are two kinds of benefits. Some are entitlements. What's an entitlement? It's something we bought, right? So Social Security, I'm buying into it out of my paycheck so that when I retire, I will get a Social Security check. That's an entitlement. Okay. There's other programs that are needs-based programs. Someone think like my sister or my son didn't work. They didn't have something come out of their paycheck. And so they're getting programs because they need them. And each of those programs have a portion of it that's cash, and some of them have a benefit that is programs and job coaching and residential support. So Social Security disability is a basic entitlement program that if I became disabled, I would have to prove to the government I'm disabled by having a limited income because of my disability, not because the jobs aren't available, but because my disability limits me. And if I cannot make there's something called substantial gainful activity. It's currently $13.10 a month. If I cannot make that, I would be considered disabled. All right. I would have to prove that. And if I could prove that, I would get a benefit based on what I paid in. But what if I didn't pay it? Okay. Well, and again, SSDI, if I was eligible for that, I would get Medicare with it. So they go together. So Security, disability, and Medicare, if I became disabled, now I paid in, I get that. And 2 years later, I would get Medicare. The 2 years later is important to understand. Okay. But what if I never paid into it? So what happens to our child? SSI is a program. It's called Supplemental Security Income. It's out of the Social Security world. And we have to be able to prove there's two rules: that our child cannot make a living, make more than $13.10 a month, which is a crazy number, but that's the number they use. Okay. And assets. So what assets can they have? A house, a car, a prepaid funeral, $2,000, and an ABLE account. Those 5 things. Many, many years, if you heard me speak years ago, it was 4 things. The ABLE account is new. We'll touch on that. Okay. House, car, prepaid funeral, $2,000, an ABLE account. The $2,000 counts everything in their name. It could be checking accounts, savings accounts, cash values of life insurance, savings bonds in the drawer. All of those get added up. So in order to have our child qualify for that $794 a month, we have to make sure that those assets, their assets in their name, are not above that. Right. So sometimes people get in trouble because they forget about the savings bonds. So we have to prove with medical records that our child cannot make the 1310, and we have to be able to prove that they don't have too many assets. When can they get this benefit? Under the age of 18, the government will look at mom and dad's assets and income. So don't go to get it until your child's 18, and you cannot get it until the month after their 18th birthday. Okay, so their birthday is April 23rd. May 1 is the first time you could apply, because in April they would look at mom and dad's assets. Okay, now when you do this application, when you submit this application when your child turns 18, the first thing they do is they go back into the system and they say, is this person eligible for SSDI? And they'll look and say, nope, they don't have 20 quarters of work, and they will send you a decline. So when you apply when your child's 18, the first thing you get a decline letter. Do not worry, it is a decline on that. Then they will go into the process of getting your child an SSI benefit. Okay, so they're going to look at their medical records. Do they have a disability stopping them from making $1310 a month? And if they agree, then they will ask you about the assets. So those are the rules that you have to get that. Once you get that, you will also get Medicaid. So what is Medicaid? Medicaid pays programs, and in California, it's called Medi-Cal. It pays healthcare. It pays for programs. It pays for a job coach. It costs the waiver money is for residential. Lots of waiver money for services in residential once your child's older. And those are the big checks, right? We have people in Pennsylvania getting $70,000 worth of support. We have people in Illinois getting $40,000 of support. There's money if you are just the personal support worker for your child. Maybe you're getting $2,000 to pay to support your own child, things like that. There's lots of different Medicaid programs. It pays for health care, but is not a replacement for your health insurance. So know that if your child is on your group health insurance, you want them to stay on that. That's a much better program than any of these government programs. How long can your child stay on your health insurance? Well, we know that under Obamacare, it's 26. But in most states, there's statutes that say if your child has a disability and you have health insurance at work, your child can probably stay on that health insurance as long as you have it. Important, don't forget that, all right? If you're not sure about it, go to your company, ask your HR people, and they may not even give you the right answer. You might have to. The other thing I'll tell you, you're going to be an advocate for your child's life. You're going to know this stuff, because sometimes you go to your HR people like, no, it's 26. Don't always believe them. Dig a little deeper. Okay. All right. So that's kind of the rules. I'm going to go through what happens in time a little bit just to give you a flow of how these benefits work. So this is an important piece of information for you to have. This is your own Social Security record. All right. This says how much you will get. So let's say this is dad's record. And it says that dad, when he reaches 67, is going to get $1,800 a month. But if he waits till 70, you get $2,288 a month. And if he at 62, he's going to get $1,197 a month. Which one do you pick? That's a financial planning answer. Okay. But I'm going to make the assumption that in this case, dad's going to retire at 67. Okay. There's two other numbers I want you to know about how to read on your Social Security statement. We see where it says family survivors. The first one says your child. That is how much a child, minor, or an adult disabled child could get. That benefit is called the DAC benefit, disabled adult child. If your child was disabled before the age of 22 and not working and making a living beyond the amount that they're allowed to make, your child will be eligible for some Social Security when you retire or when you take your benefit. There's another number on your record that says total family benefits cannot be more than $3,116. Important. Okay, I'm going to go through a really simple example to help you see how this all fits together. So I'm just going to go through an example. The person with a disability, when you see me using PWD, it's a short phrase I use for person with a disability, turns 18. Parents are still working. We said the child could apply for SSI, and probably they won't be applying. You'll probably be applying for them, especially if you're the guardian, at $794 a month. So let's assume your child gets that amount. They will get the $794. Now, if you apply and your child doesn't get the full amount, it's probably because you said they're living at home. So just remember that you might want your child, when you apply, to say your child's living at home and paying you room and board so that they will get their full amount, because otherwise they consider a free place to live it's income and they discount your child's benefits. Okay, little trick. Okay, so your child gets a $794 when they're 18. Dad retires. What's going to happen when dad retires? Well, dad retires and he's going to get his age 67 benefit. Let's say mom stayed home and took care of the child and she didn't have any social security record. So mom is eligible for her own or half of dad's, whichever is greater. So in this case, dad got his full benefit. So we're going to go back to that number really quick. Dad got the 1,800 and mom's going to get about 902. So after we go to those two, we're going to look and say, well, what's left of the family maximum? It was 3,116. So if we track out the amount that's paid to mom and dad, there is $410 left. Well, who gets that? That's called DAC. So when dad applies and mom applies, they get their checks. And it all depends upon when they take it, right? But dad would take his and mom gets hers. And they will, on the application, when you apply, they will say, do you have a child with a disability? And you answer yes. They will come look at your child's SSI and say they're getting SSI, but we can bump them up to more money. And the most they could get is 410 from DAC. And so what do they do? The child's still getting 794. Why is this good? Okay. They gave them the 410. That's all they could get. So their SSI is always to bring you up to 794, but not more. So they reduce the SSI when the SSA kicks in. Why is it good? It's the same number, right? That's what your child's getting. Well, let's look at it, because in 2 years after getting SSTI, they get Medicare. Same benefit as seniors get. It's a pretty good health insurance plan. And so at that point, your child would be getting SSI, SSTI, Medicare, and Medicaid would be the supplement. Now, there's lots of rules when that happens. So if you want to learn more about that, you probably read a lot, or we have some seminars and webinars on that. But just I want you to know the concept. Okay, so that when you retire, you think carefully about when you retire, what benefits and who takes what when, right? So you're not a normal financial planning couple. You have to do some things very uniquely. Okay, so here's your child getting their 410 and 384. When parents pass away, there's no money coming out of dad's record anymore. So what happens? The parent passes away and the child's going to get more. What will the child get? They will get that maximum amount we saw in that Social Security record of $1,257 was the maximum a child or disabled adult child could get. The child will go into the $1,257 a month. That's good, right? There's more money for your child support. They'll get that. They won't get SSI anymore because they're already over the 794, but they will keep Medicare and they will keep their Medicaid. So it changes all the time. These numbers change all the time. It's good for you to have a concept that you have to make sure you keep your assets of your child lower, like house, car, prepaid funeral, $2,000 in an ABLE account. And it's important to understand that your Social Security matters. So homework is go up, pull your Social Security statements and look at what they are. Be curious, because it'll matter when you retire. All right, get those statements for yourself and know what's on them. All right, some things to know. Learn about your health insurance. Go to your HR department. Know what's going to happen when you retire. Know what's going to happen when your health insurance goes away, that Medicare is going to be important. Know that when your child turns 26, they're not necessarily off your health insurance. 2, get your Social Security records. Have them. Understand them. If you work with a financial advisor, don't think they understand this. There's no training for financial advisors on this. This is you knowing it, not your professionals. So you will find professionals who knew this, but it's not typical. All right. All right. So how are you going to do this? Because when we calculated out how much your child's going to need in that calculation where we said 10,000 is coming in and they need 40, so they're short 30,000 a month, how are you going to leave them money if something happens to you, if they can only have $2,000? That doesn't click, right? All right. So there's some legal options that we can take. The legal options have to do with setting money aside for your child, but not having it counted against them. Okay. Well, there's things that we can do. So let's talk about how we might do that. When we pass away, this is having to do with having your wills and create those things. A lot of parents put off this stuff. It is, people come in sometimes and say, oh, I don't want to do that. It feels icky. I don't want to think about dying. And for us, it's even overwhelming. Our child needs us. But as parents, it's even much more important that we do this planning. Okay. If it's a typical family, it's important. But you know what, if something happened and would family come up to the table and says, I'll step in, I'll help? Sure, they will. We're a little different. We need to think a lot more seriously. I say all the time about our money and how we put it away. It's not like when we pass away, we can say, well, I spent it. My kids won't get an inheritance. We don't get to do that. We also don't have the ability to say, okay, if I don't have a will, I don't have a will. We have to think about this. Okay. So as I'm talking about a lot of these things, I want you to just note, how important is this in your world? Do you have a trust? If you do, I'm going to give you some things to look for. If you don't have a will or anything, what should you ask the attorney? So one, you can't leave assets to the person with the disabilities. Okay. Now, when I started this with my parents, I wanted to see what they had done for my sister. That's really how I got started, thinking about my planning for my sister. And asked my parents what planning they had done. And they said, don't worry, we have it. They didn't want to talk about it. And I kept bugging them for 2 years. What have you done? What have you done? So they finally, my dad said, fine, we have everything done. We have a will. The will, we're disinheriting Marcia. We're not leaving anything to her. And you're going to get her share. I thought, wow, that was hard. Why'd they do that? Now, I wasn't doing this. I've been doing this for 30 years. So it was 31 years ago when I had this conversation with my dad. Why did they do that? Well, because my sister couldn't have any money and they knew it. And the attorney told me to do that. Now, most attorneys know that's not the answer anymore. Why wasn't it? I loved my sister. I'm a financial person. So wouldn't the combinations work without having all kinds of legal documents? Might. Okay. But if I'm holding money for my sister, it's mine. So I'll pay tax on it. Okay. Two, we're assuming that I'm a good sister and I'm financially secure and I don't need to borrow it, right? So not every sibling's the same. We're also thinking that, well, I'll plan properly, but if I die and leave it to my children, I don't know if my sons would have the same feeling about taking care of my sister that I would, right? What if I was married and put it in joint tenancy, knowing my husband's a good guy and he'll step up and he'll take care of her, but in the end we end up getting divorced and we put it in joint tenancy with him, half of it's up for divorce. So that is not an answer. Putting it in the other children's name is not a good answer. There's too much risk. Okay. So we can't give it to the child. We shouldn't give it to the sibling with our fingers crossed. And then we shouldn't do what we do for other children where we say we're going to put it in trust and look at it at a certain age. That's called the spendthrift support trust. But we have something we can use called a discretionary third-party special needs trust. Now, this trust is a document that we create with an attorney. We can't just go to the bank and open one. It's a trust that says, I'm putting money into this trust. It's never my child's. That's why it works. It's never my child's. They can't control it, but it's for their benefit. So we put inheritances into the special needs trust. It is spent for our child's special needs care. And when our child passes away, we're going to say who gets it. Okay. So we're totally in control of how we do this. We might say a half of our estate. We might say 25% if we have 4 children. We might say the beneficiary of my life insurance goes to this trust. I'm going to be the trustee. Okay. What's a trustee? Okay. A trust is a bunch of paper. It's just the paper that says, I'm putting money in this account and this is how it should be used. Okay. So who can set this up? Moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas. The only person's money we can't put in is your child's. So if your child has too much money, we can't use this. Who's in charge of this money? Well, me as the parent, I'm in charge, right? I can determine all that way that money should be spent. But when something happens to me, I've got to also put in this book, this trust document, who's in charge after me. So it's like I'm a president for this little account. And I'm going to say who my successors are, the other children, our trust company, aunts and uncles, who's going to do it after me, because this is something that has to last our child's lifetime, right? It's for our child. It's not for somebody else. It's for our child, that one person who has special needs. It's for over and above what the government spends. So the government will pay up to here, but there's all these things the government won't pay. They might pay for some housing expenses, might pay for some care expenses, but they're not going to pay for your child's cell phone. They're not going to pay for their extraordinary medical bills. It's not going to pay for a vacation if there's somebody, the caregiver and the future caregiver wants to take them on vacation. It's not going to pay for those things. We have to pay for all the supplemental care costs. The government won't fund that. Okay, so it's for that. We're going to count on the government, we hope, to pay for the basic support, and we are going to pay for all that. So it's important to do that planning I was talking about. How much is needed? The money in that must be the account that it's in, The trust should say it's irrevocable, and that means that it can't be changed. Now, the government's going to look at it. They don't want you being able to later say, well, my child can have it. It has specific rules. These attorneys know how to write this. But also, these rules might change. They might change while we're alive, and they might change when we're dead. So we want that trust to be irrevocable, but amendable to stay compliant with the law by future trustees. So if you have a trust, you might look inside of it. Okay, you might look and see what it's all about. Now, when did you set this trust up? Right before you die? Well, I don't know if you know it. I don't know that. So we need to do it now. It's our responsibility to make sure things are in place. Now, sometimes people come in and they have a will, and I open up their will, and in the will it says, when I die, create a trust. That's called a testamentary trust. It means it's created in my testament. I don't want that. I don't want something that says, when I die, create it, because I don't know 10, 20, 30 years from now what the laws will be. I don't know if they'll let me do this. I want to have one that I create right now. I sign it and it exists. So I'm going to have a will, and my will is going to say, put the money in the trust, and the trust is a whole different document. So if you have a will and inside of it is a trust, go back to the attorney and say, I don't want my special needs trust inside. I want my special needs trust separate. I also want to be referred to it. So I want to do two things with that special needs trust. I want it to be created today because the rules are good. In every state, you can do this. I also want it to be used by other people. So if I create a special needs trust for my son, it exists, I signed it. His brothers who do not have disabilities, but don't have their own children yet, they might make the beneficiary of the life insurance at work their brother, but it can't be their brother. Okay. It needs to be, my son's name is Mark. It should be Mark's special needs trust, not Mark. Okay. So that's a really important piece of having this trust created as a standalone document. How do you get money in the trust? As I said, we have a will. A will leaves money in it. All right. Beneficiaries of life insurance, beneficiaries of retirement accounts can all be made to the trust once we have it set up. Okay. Your wills, your life insurance, your retirement. You can also open up an account. If you have a trust and you signed it, you could even open up a bank account and say, I'm going to start saving money. I can open up an investment account and start saving money in the name of the trust. It's just the title on the account that makes the money in it. There's no book you're going to put money inside of. It's how we title it. So I could have a Mark Eller Special Needs Trust account. I'd be the trustee. I'm the one who's managing it. Sometimes it's a hard concept. Now, remember, I said these are called third-party special needs trusts, and the money that we put in it is for my son. And when he passes away, it's going to go to who I say, his other brothers, my grandchildren, maybe charities. What if I already goofed? What if I already have money in my son's name and I'm going to want to get him benefits? There's another kind of special needs trust. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. It's called a first-party special needs trust or a payback trust. That trust is just like the other one until my son dies. That trust, so let's say my son wins a lotto and he gets $50,000. That would cut him off from benefits. It's more than $2,000. But I can take and create this other kind of trust, put the $50,000 in the trust. It's used for his lifetime. When he passes away, if there's a little bit left, the government can go back and recapture some of that. We call it clawbacking into the trust for Medicaid spent. If that happens to you, where your child gets money and they're going to be disqualified, you need to quickly see an attorney. Okay, a lot of details. All right. How do you find somebody who does this? So I'll tell you there's three kinds of attorneys. Well, first of all, there's lots of general attorneys, right? There's real estate attorneys. You don't want that. You don't want somebody who does something that doesn't do with estate planning. We want an estate planning attorney. There's estate planning attorneys who know special needs really well. There's some who know nothing about it, know to get them to them. And then there's the ones in the middle who don't know very much and are probably going to make some mistakes on your behalf. So be really careful. If you're not sure if your trust is right, I always say, email me a copy. I'll look at it quickly and give you my feedback. If you don't know attorney, you can go to our website. We have lots of attorneys' names on there. You can also go to places like the Special Needs Alliance, which is the top attorneys in special needs are listed there. There's also a website called Special Needs Planners. The attorneys who aren't those top gurus, but the next level down who are really good too are there. All right. So there's lots of attorneys placed to find them. Now, we got the legal stuff done. We got the plan done. Those aren't the hard decisions. Okay. We had to name money people on that side. Now we have to think about who's going to handle my child, who's going to take care of my son if something happens to me. Not his money, not the money to take care of him, but who's going to step in and fill my shoes? Who's going to make medical decisions and government benefit decisions and school, and if he can work and day programs and care that he needs? Who's going to do that? That's called the guardian, or whoever it is. Maybe if they're not the guardian, they're just the caregiver. I call them the care people. It's the reason we don't go to the attorney, because we don't know who these people are. Can they really understand what we're going to ask them to do? Well, the job's going to last them. I'm going to give it to them, and then they're going to have it, and they got to pass it on. Should I pick my brother and his wife, or just my brother? Maybe just his wife. Should I pick the same people as the trustees? These are conversations you should have with the attorney when you're doing your legal documents about making these decisions. So care people and money people. Okay. The other thing you should know, that when your child turns 18, it's a special age. They get to apply for benefits, but they also become legal adults. You are no longer their guardian. You are their parent, and you don't have any legal rights anymore, or medical rights, or financial rights. So when your child turns 18, you need to have a discussion about, should you do nothing? Should you let your child have their own authority? Is your child high enough functioning to sign a power of attorney to give you some rights? Or are they not high enough functioning, and that you have to actually go to court and become their guardian or their conservator? So other steps. So we talked about planning, we talked about financial planning, we talked about estate planning, and we talked about guardianship. 4 big responsibilities. All right. When the attorney sits down with you, they're going to ask you some questions. How many children do you have? 3. What are you worth? What do you owe? They're going to ask you your financial questions. They're not being nosy. They need to help you. So they know, do you need wills? Do you need trusts? You do need a special needs trust. What else do you need? Then they're going to say, okay, how do you want to split the money? Well, how do you know what to do? Well, if we did that plan up front, we probably have a sense of what it is. So if that money is more than we have, maybe we need some life insurance. If it's half of what we have, are we going to give half to the special needs trust and half to the other 2 kids? We're going to split it that way. Or are we going to split it? So I call it the head versus heart. My heart tells me be equal. My head's saying I can't be equal. My son needs more than the other 2. So these are questions you're going to have to be thinking about when you go see the attorney. Hard questions, right? Okay, so what tools are you going to need to do all this? 1, attorneys. You need to get a special needs trust done. Maybe you only did the third party, which is one on the left. Maybe there's money in your child's name. Maybe you're divorced and we have to use this payback trust for divorce. If you're divorced, it's some special planning you need to do. So you need trusts. You might need an ABLE account. I think everybody who has a child with special needs probably should have this ABLE account. Remember I said house, car, prepaid funeral, $2,000, and an ABLE. An ABLE account is a special prepaid savings plan. The money you put in is tax-free. It can be used only for approved expenses. It's for somebody who's had a disability that occurred prior to the age of 26. These are the rules that you can use. Your child can only have 1, not 2, not 3, just 1 of these accounts. The total amount that can go into them right now is $15,000 a year. And it's capped by the state. So these are state programs. Some states have them, some states don't. Okay. Florida has one, only Florida residents can be in it. Illinois has one, and it's in a consortium of 16 other states, and any state can use, anybody can use an Illinois plan. Wisconsin doesn't have one. So it's by state. So you need to find out which state which would be good. There's places online that you can go online. And if you need that, I could email it to you of how do you compare your state to another state? Okay, you can look at the National Disability Institute on there. They have an ABLE program, big ABLE program nationally where you can compare them. You want to learn about your state because like in Illinois, if you make a contribution to Illinois, you get to deduct your contribution just like a college savings plan. This account is great because if your child can only have $2,000 and grandma gives them some money and their account goes over and above that, you can get it out. You don't have to spend it right away. You could save it. So the amount the child might have over 2,000, you can put it into the ABLE account. Grandma wants to give gifts. People want to give gifts to your child. They can now put it in the ABLE account. It's a great, great tool. Okay. The things to know about it is if your child's account has more than 100,000 and they have SSI, SSI could be suspended. So that's the warning. Use it up to 100,000 or fund it, but you can only put 15,000 a year away. If you haven't started one, you got a little time. Right? But just know that if you're on SSI, they have a warning up to that point. If they get out of SSI and go to DAC when you're older, then that warning goes away. Right? But the other thing to know about the ABLE is that when your child passes away, there is a payback to the government to pay Medicaid spent. It's calculated from the date the account was set up. People say, oh, I'm not going to use it then. It's a great, great tool. You may not fund it to the, in Illinois, you can put 450,000 in them. I don't think I would fund my sons to 450,000 because I'm going to have the special needs trust to fund the big money. But I want this ABLE account, so every time his account gets close to 2,000, I can move the money over. It also allows him to have some authority over that account and have access to money that he wouldn't have. So I can, help him do that. My son is able to take control of some of it based upon his abilities. You have to look at that. All right. The other thing to know right now about them is maximum going is 15. What if you by mistake opened up a college savings account when your child was younger? You didn't know about their disability. Now you got these 529 accounts. They're your money. They're not your child's. But if you want to take that college money and roll it over to a ABLE, you can do that at the level of 15,000 a year. So you're allowed to do that. There's lots of new rules. If your child can work, they can also contribute extra money to it. There's lots of education about these ABLEs. There's too much to go into today, but just know it exists and it's a way to save money for your child. All right. The last thing I want you to know is that we have done lots of planning here, right? We have created a plan for you. We've created a plan for your child. Two very important steps. The third one is we're going to make sure they have all the benefits they can get. And we're going to make sure that we don't have too much money in their name. The fourth thing we're going to do is go see the attorney and get the legal documents done. Maybe another thing we're going to do is open the ABLE account. So let's say you do all of these things and you're really good at it. You do all the planning you need to do. And I hope you're taking notes about not all the details of this, but as you listen to me, you go, that's pretty important. Write these things down. And I want you to circle the ones that you're saying, these are really important. I got to do them quick, right? So if I'm the person I'm going to be the guardian for your child. Okay. And I don't know your child really well, but something happens to you. We never know when things going to happen. The one thing I know is this stuff is really important. Naming guardians and doing this stuff is really important. This pandemic and the timing of this is always really interesting because it has been a rough year for a lot of us, right? And we don't know what the future holds. Something could happen to any of us any point in time, in a day, in a week, in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, we don't know. But someday somebody else might become responsible for our child. If I became responsible for my sister, I knew pretty lot. Later on, I learned I didn't know nearly enough when my parents started telling me about her later, and I was connected to the hip to her. Okay. I hope that I'm communicating things about my son to other people. So if something happens to me, they can step up and do what's needed to be done. But if you passed away and somebody came to me and said, well, you're going to take care of Billy, or I pass away and somebody goes to someone and says, okay, Marianne indicated that you would be the one to help Mark the rest of his life. What do they know? What do they know? We know so much as parents. What about where he lives? What's his house set up? He's blind. Okay, he has OCD. There's all these things that have to be different for his lifetime, right? How is his house set up? How does he get around? How does he take care of himself? How does he get to the doctor? How does he do all that stuff? Is he studying anything? Is he going to school? What's the school all about? This person who I'm identifying who might step into my shoes, have they ever been to his IEP with me? What about, could he work? Could he work? Has he ever had a job that was a failure and he shouldn't try that? How do I help him? How do you help him if you're going to be responsible for my son? Write down the doctors, write down the medicine. Also write down the doctor to never see again, because those other people have not had that experience with your child. They don't know who the bad doctors are, the good doctors are. They don't know what medicines to try, what medicines that you already tried that didn't work. And they want to know who the great doctors are. See this person for all the different things he needs or she needs. Social life. So my son could communicate. My sister could not communicate that great. So who are her friends? Who do I need to tell somebody about her so that they would have made her life great? Who would I need to tell somebody about my son and what he really loves to do? And that this is how I want some of that money in the special needs trust spent to make him happy, right? What about the habits? I know that you spend time keeping your child safe. We spend so much time thinking about what works. What are the little things that work? And how do we discover them? And someone is going to step in my shoes and they don't know all the little things. They know the big things I told them, but I forgot to tell them the little things that really matter. So we need to write those down. We need to communicate. We need to figure out a way to just keep thinking about it and keep writing it down. We have a online computer system that we store it for our clients, get access to it if you'd like. We're hoping to get this into an app so that we're just out somewhere and we say, I want to tell somebody this, and I can remember to put it into the app. But we got to write it down. However you do it is important. Then once you write it down or put it in a computer, it's worthless unless you share it. So I always say, as you're doing your planning, a family meeting is a really good thing to have so that people know where things are. They know what you expect. They know what you, people are always thinking it's going to be a bigger job because they don't know the rules are set and the things you help them with it. So it's good to have a family meeting. Now I'm going to ask you to do one last thing before I go for questions. And my one last thing is, let's just reframe really quickly. Do you have a financial plan? Yes, no. Might be important. Do you have done a care plan for your child to say what's important? What do I think their lives are going to be like? Just to pick a piece of paper and just write it down. What's that look like? Have you done that? Have you got the special needs trust? Have you taken money out of your child's name so by the time they're 18, it's not going to be a problem? Have you looked at everything? Have you seen an attorney and figured out with the attorney, how should you fund your child's future? Do you have enough for yourself and for your child? Okay. Have you written a book about your child, written something down about your child? So kind of put you in the, if you got to have your own planning done and you got to have your child's planning done. Of all those things, I mean, if you have a trust, is it going into the trust to make sure it's irrevocable and changeable for the future? Or are you kind of stuck with something that isn't changeable? All those things we talked about, what's the number one thing that you're going to do in the next 3 months? Okay, that's all I want you to figure out. And write down for yourself on a card, I call these guilt cards, that I am committing to myself that I'm going to open up my trust, or I'm committing to myself to get a financial plan done, or I'm committing to know that I'm going to retire in the next 3 months and I better get some help because I don't know how that's going to impact my child's Social Security. Or I'm going to get the money out of my child's name. I don't care what it is. Write down the thing that you heard today in this little short time that you're going to do first and second. Okay, I think that will help get you started. Starting is sometimes the hardest thing, right? Okay, so I'm going to now stop and see what kind of questions we have.
Marianne, thank you so much. I attended your session in 2019 and had my guilt card, and because of you was able to open the special needs trust that I needed to.
I love that.
Today I have 2 more things that I need to, that I wrote down. I got my little stickies on my desk. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You remind us to do the things that we need to do.
Good.
We have one question that came through the chat. Marianne is thanking you for the great talk and asking, do you have to have a lawyer create a trust? And if so, about how much should someone expect to spend on that? And are there forms online that can be done for more of a DIY?
Okay, good question. So I will tell you, yes, you need an attorney for the special needs trust. Absolutely. And you need a special attorney who does it. So this is one thing I always tell people to think about this in the frame of, if I was sick and had a heart issue, but it'd be cheaper to see, my next door neighbor said he could help me get my heart surgery done. He's a dentist, or he's a podiatrist. He's a doctor, right? Just because they're attorneys or estate attorneys doesn't mean they know this. Now, you might just need, if you're a couple, 2 wills and a special needs trust. What you would have is 2 wills, special needs trust, and powers of attorney for you. Powers of attorney, if you don't have anything, I would suggest you go online and go to your state website and get powers of attorney temporarily for healthcare and property if you don't have them for yourself. So if you just need 2 wills and a special needs trust, you might be in the anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000. Depends on how complicated it is. If you also need your own trust, you'll probably be more in the $4,500 to $5,000 to $6,000. Every attorney is different. Some, it's just like any other field, people charge more or less. The more prepared you are, and when you go into the attorney's office and say, I know about this, you don't have to teach me. I've listened. I've picked out my people. I picked out my caregivers. I picked out the people who are going to be my money people. You go prepared. The attorney is going to tend to stay on the lighter side than the heavy side. If you go in and say, I don't know what I'm doing, I haven't thought about it at all, the attorney knows they're going to have more follow-up. Okay. But I always tell people, think between $2,000 and $5,000 is a good rule of thumb for having to do your planning. Attorneys will sometimes charge hourly. I always try to find people who charge flat rates so you kind of know what you're getting into. And they'll also let you pay on a paid program if it's difficult for you. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Do we have any other questions? I know this is a meaty topic with a lot of
Yeah.
variables. I think my last question is just any, so when you think about, 529s, someone who has already got one set up, really, are there any implications to now needing, excuse me, let me step back. You mentioned very well-meaning family and friends who send money to your children and now moving it over. Is it as simple as just retitling those assets into the trust or transferring it to Enable?
Yeah, you wouldn't put them probably in the trust. So a college account, okay, remember 529 has the rules that you put the money in and it's growing tax-free. If you just take it and put it in the trust, any income on it will be taxable and you'd have a penalty of 10% of the growth because you didn't use it for school. But if you take that college account, open up an ABLE, it's a loud transfer to transfer the. Now, if you're going for benefits and you have a 529 for your child, it's not theirs. So first of all, if you think they're going to go to college or any kind of school that you could use it for, some states you can use it even for high school special programs, you might use it for that. But if you know they're not going to, now you're going to either have to get it out and pay penalties and taxes. The benefit of moving into the ABLE is you're allowed to move up to 15,000 to the year to the ABLE. It won't be taxable. There's no penalties to move it. So it's an allowable transfer.
That's
Okay.
really helpful.
Okay.
A question came in saying, just reiterating, you had mentioned that people can share their special needs trusts with you. Would they do that by emailing?
Yes, they can email me at info@protectedtomorrows.com and it would get to me. I will look at it. If you want it sent securely, just email that you'd like to share it and someone will send you an encrypted way to send it to us. And we'll look at it quickly. We have a team of people and we'll look at it. We're not attorneys, but we'll look at it and say, you need to say an attorney or this is great. If you want to include the name of the attorney, I can sometimes tell if they're really, before I even look at it. But if you do that, send me enough information because sometimes I don't know who the parents are, who the people are. So give me some context.
Helpful.
Happy to do that though.
Any thoughts on, there's different ABLEs in different states. I know you mentioned that, but are there ones that are particularly better or ones that you would recommend more strongly than another?
I think when these started, I will tell you the very first ABLE that came about was Ohio. And a lot of people use it because of that. I will tell you that the consortium of the plans at Illinois and the 16 states of Illinois that are combined, it is low costs. It has checking accounts. It has debit cards. And if you live in Illinois, that state is deductible, but it might be really important for you if someone is going to contribute to it, they want to take the deduction. So if I open one and my sister wanted to contribute to my child's and she lived in Illinois, she could deduct it. So I would really look at, I think it's ABLE. It's if you type ABLE, you will find that ABLE resource, a National Resource Center. And they have a comparison tool that you can type, these are the 3 states I want to check. And it'll put them side to side to say this one, Illinois, you get a deduction. It'll say this one, this is the fees. But I know that Illinois and a consortium of states were able to negotiate with the financial. So it's a state program. The financial companies decide what the costs are going to be, the investment houses. So those costs in those programs are really, really low.
Fantastic.
Okay.
What happens in cases of divorce?
Okay.
Do they then each create a trust or does that trust stay the same, but you're changing trustees?
So divorce has some very special planning, right? So when you create a special needs trust, you're going to name who's in control of it and who gets it when your child dies. So if you're a couple and you're both putting money in it, it tends to usually be, okay, who's going to get it? If you decide we're going to each put money into it and we die, we're going to split it to our heirs, that's one thing. But most of the time in couples who are divorced, they might each have their own because maybe they're controlling who's going to get my money if my son doesn't need it, right? The other thing you know about divorce is a really important thing. So if there's child support to be paid. So let's say that I'm married and I get divorced and my husband is going to pay child support. Child support can be paid for the lifetime of a child with a disability in most states. So if I'm going to get child support for the lifetime of my child, if it's paid after he's 18, it's his money, not mine. Oops, now he's got income. So the child support needs to be paid by court order to that first party special needs trust. So dad perhaps is paying child support. Here's mom. Mom has a special needs trust, a first party trust, not the third party. The child support by court order is paid to that first party, and mom is the trustee for her son. So if you are getting divorced and getting child support issues, it's really, really important. Otherwise, your child could lose their benefits. Okay.
Wow, that is important.
It's very
I-
complex.
I would not have thought of that.
Yeah.
I went ahead and put the email address in the chat for
Okay.
anyone that does want to take Marianne up on her offer.
Okay.
It doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in, but thank you so much to everyone who
welcome.
attended and engaged, and to Marianne. You're just a wealth of knowledge.
Thanks.
And
Thanks.
I will attest, your website has so many great tools. So if you want to learn more about all of this, please go to protectedtomorrows.com and you can find some more resources there.
You're welcome. We have all kinds of free classes online, so anybody's welcome to attend.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Well,
Great.
we're glad to have you as part of the
Thank you.
NBIA community. So thank you. And
Thank you. I love working with your group. So thank you.
thank you. Well,
Okay.
everyone, this is our last formal session of the day. Up next, we have a couple of meetup groups as well as our social hour. So if you want to come have some fun with us, join. Otherwise, we will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early for day 3.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.